So I'm Ruhi Dang. I am a senior product manager at Amazon Web Services, which is our cloud space. So to give you, I'll briefly outline what I do at Amazon Web Services at AWS, and then I'll start from there just to set the stage, set the context. So I work in S3, which is our storage platform. So cloud storage within AWS is S3. S3 is a pretty large service. It has locations across the world, across the globe. We have a pretty big team sitting in Seattle, in Vancouver, and in Cambridge, UK. So some of the challenges that a lot of you as managers or leaders would have come across of either managing away teams or dealing with different time zones, and how do you work with teams that are 8 hours away, 12 hours away. How do you coordinate things? How do you keep things rolling, keep things fast? Is a challenge that was the first challenge I faced here. Something else that I felt was crucial to the job I was in. It was so essential to move fast. And if you can't move fast, then you can't survive in this world. So what I do is I own certain parts of S3. So everything that has to do with feature development for a part of S3 is what I look at. It involves everything from coming up with product ideas to writing documents that state the vision of where this product is going, to working with engineering, trying to figure out what needs to be built, what is the technical solution like, to working with finance, trying to figure out how should we price this, what are the cost components involved, to working with the console and the UX guys to see what the experience is like, working with documentation to see what our developer guides, our API guides look like, and then closing the loop on marketing at the end. You've got to market your product, you've got to track adoption. So it sounds like 10 different jobs, but as they say, as a PM, you're the CEO of your little product. So you have to manage all these 10 different jobs and work with 10 different teams. And that's survival to me. That idea of working with these teams who are experts in their own domains is what I call survival, and I'll talk a bit about that. So that's just an overview of the kind of things I touch upon. I talked about somewhat what I do, but I want to get into some highlights of what I deal with day to day. So at any point in my job, I am looking at 2 to 5 projects. Each project is a feature we are about to launch, whether this year, next year, or in 2 years. So right now, I have 4 projects. Some of them are things that I deal with here. So data encryption. It's something very essential to storage. So when you're storing data at rest, it should be encrypted with the most updated algorithms. What's the new technology out there? How are we improving it? How are we constantly innovating? It's something I do on a frequent basis currently. This is funny. It's my favorite bit. Undersea optic fibers. I'd never thought I'd talk about this, but because we have data centers across the world, data moves around as well. And I promise I will shut up about storage in a bit, but I want to start with it. So data moves around across the world. So we're sending bytes from the US to Asia, and they're going through these optic fibers. How wide these optic fibers are, what does capacity planning look like? I'd never thought I'd come and have these discussions with my engineers and talk to them about, hey, this is the capacity, this is the throughput we have. How do we expand it? How do we offer better features that depend on optic fibers that we don't own? There is a lot of compliance that comes into, and the reason I'm touching on all this is that topics you didn't think you'd have to deal with come into the picture when you're developing a feature or a product start to end. So dealing with regulators, because a lot of our data storage is from healthcare industries, financial services industries. These people have regulated data. So making sure that when we're providing them a platform, it is compliant is another thing. This is a part of, I think, what almost all product managers in tech deal with. You've got to understand the APIs, you've got to understand the SDKs that you're building for, how UX is working, the ease of use of what people are designing. And then finally, I call these developer guides. You could have different names for them, but how are you making what you're building easily accessible to developers if you are in a B2B product design? So this is what I do right now. It may sound ultra complicated. I tried to simplify it. Some of it really is. It boggles me day to day. But the reason I'm here today is because I think it's doable. And I think it's very much doable without having the right background. And that's the start of my talk. Now, you might be coming from a place where you've been an engineer, you've done this for a living, and you're transitioning into a PM role or are interested about it. So for you, what I listed out might be something that's very much accessible, but some of the other skills of a PM role might not be. And what I want to highlight here is that you don't need to have a background because none of this is rocket science, and it's very much doable. So what did I study that I'm talking about all this? Well, computer science, no. So that's what I studied, just for context. In terms of what my background is like, what did I do right after? You'd think data science based on all the jargon I'm talking about, but no. So a very atypical, and I know MBAs are not very well respected in the tech industry, so I had to deal with a lot of that transitioning into a product role in a super technical organization like S3. What did I do before this job? And I was talking to Priya, what I did was not software development. What I did was sales and trading. So it's something close to my heart in terms of how I've moved around in my career and where I've landed. And I've come to believe that you don't have to be a specialist to excel at this. You could be a generalist. You could learn skills in very different kind of jobs that you can use in a PM job. This is, sorry if that was too fast, but having a computer science degree is not really necessary. But the fact that I'm standing here and I'm passionately talking about data storage is only because I was eager to learn about what was going on in my team. And so a thirst for technical knowledge absolutely is. These are some things I do to get where I get today and not make a fool of myself in front of my developers. Just reading of all kinds. The first 3 months at my current job was literally watching all recorded videos inside the company, reading all documents I could find. There is never a dearth of resources out there. It's hard. It takes a while, but back to the point, as long as you're passionate about the product you're building or want to build, and are passionate about doing this day in and day out instead of Netflix, I think that goes a long way. It did for me. So these are some things you could do if you don't like reading and getting in your bed and reading till 3 a.m. like I did. I have not come across one engineer in all of AWS who I walked up to and said, hey, I know you built this. I'm really interested. Take out 30 minutes, sit with me, and teach me what you do. And that is the one thing that I didn't think existed because I came from a sales and trading background. I used to work at Deutsche Bank, and I don't want to badmouth the company, but you walk up to a trader and you're like, hey, I'm in the same business. We're doing this trade. I need a little help with this Excel sheet. Can you help me? They're not even going to turn their head and look at you. Forget answering your question. This is what a Wall Street trading floor to me looked like. It could be different in different companies and to different people, but the tech world is so different. And I experienced this firsthand, that walking up to any engineer and asking them what they're building, what the technical details are, as long as you're interested in listening to them, is for me went such a long way. Just brainstorming with them, ideas about what they've built, whether it's relevant to you or not, it helps build that relationship. So the second point that I'm coming to is going to be the majority of what I want to talk about. It's something I have learned over the years, and it's something I feel is crucial from a leadership perspective. I mentioned this earlier. As a product manager, you're supposed to be the CEO of the product you're building. So you're leading without authority. You are probably not directly managing the engineers. They don't report to you. They report to the engineering manager. You are not directly managing the finance team that is going to give you the cost model. You are not directly managing the UX team. You might have direct reports who are product people. But outside of that, you're leading without authority. And I say leading because the vision of a product from start to end is owned by the PM. And unless you have that leadership, and unless you have the level of interaction and communication that is needed for that leadership, it's going to be very hard to get people to walk along with you and to walk in your vision, come along with you. And so I want to talk about two things, which is connection and conviction. And when to put which hat, and how to differentiate between them, and how to know what's important when. Now, I'd like to think that one should always have high connection and high conviction, and that's not always possible. So I'll start with defining what I think these two are. So I'll start with conviction. Conviction comes in two parts. The first is having an opinion about what you think is the right thing to do. So walking into a meeting or walking to a person and knowing that you have an informed opinion and you know what you think of the meeting, the product, the idea. The second is making that conviction known. So projecting to the room or the person you're interacting with as to what that conviction is. And how do you form that conviction? These are a few things that have helped me, and this list is endless. But knowing things like what is important here, what are the priorities, what are the key decisions we're going to make, how will success be measured, and I think I'll start with an example, and I'll take it throughout me as I talk about connection and conviction. So in April, AWS launched Hongkong Region. So we expanded our services to Hong Kong. This particular expansion was a little different from all the region launches we've done in the sense that it had extra security requirements. It was a very customer-obsessed way of looking at this region. Hong Kong is a part of China mainland. Customers storing data in Hong Kong are concerned about security and how the China government controls or could potentially one day have impact on storage policies. So AWS, at the AWS level, which includes 168 public services, and S3 is one of them, made a decision that we will change how this new region looks and works. And so every service team, including S3, had to adapt to these new policies. So I was looking at this project, and I owned how the experience of cloud storage in Hong Kong will look like. Now, to me, measuring conviction here were things like, what do I want S3 in Hong Kong to look like? What do I need to make decisions on to get this ball moving, to make sure we launch in this new region? And how will I measure success? So just going through those examples. What matters most? To me, what mattered most was that we launched on time. We had a deadline. We had to launch in Hong Kong. Storage is one of the biggest services. If we become a blocker of all of AWS, everything gets blocked. So to me, what mattered the most was that this goes smoothly, we launch on time, not a very unrealistic measure. I'll skip to 3. What are the key decisions to be made? So because of these new security requirements, we had to re-architect different pieces of our components within S3 to comply with the new security requirements. So the key decisions that had to be made was, out of all the options we have for re-architecture, what are we going to pick? Which technical design makes most sense? The factors that go into the decision are, what did the customer experience look like? What's technically feasible? Are we going to break something if we make any of these decisions? Let's say I have 3 technical design solutions. What are the implications of all 3 of them? How will success be measured? Is when the region launches, how much storage do we get? What is the adoption rate of this? So these were my convictions in the back of my head, and I'll keep this here and I'll go to the next topic, which is building connection. Connection is about making sure that people are aware that you're listening to them. Connection is not about being nice. It's not about networking. It's not about walking into a room and knowing what they did last weekend. And I feel that's what in my head connection used to be, but it's not. Connection is the fact that when I walk into a room and I'm talking to my engineers, they think I'm going to listen to their perspective. And they think that they have a voice, and I will hear them out, we'll discuss it, and they have a space to talk about it. Things to know what connection to build is just a few examples here. What is important for success? If I'm working with 3 different engineering teams within my org, what is important for success for me is that everyone aligns with my vision. It could be a vision that I have not come up with, but I as a product manager own. So that's important for success. Who are the individuals or groups that have the key information? Like I said, I probably don't know how to write the code of the re-architecture I was talking about, but there are key important people in the room, like engineering managers, and I want to make sure that I understand that that's where my connection is coming from. Who has the power or influence? This comes into play in more strategic decisions when you're talking about pivoting the vision of where your product is going, and you or people at your level are not able to make decisions, then you have a connection upwards. How do other people define success? Does the engineering team define success the same way I do? Most likely not. I define success based on how many customers are happy, based on how many customers are using storage. They define success on, did the code work? Did they have to debug 10 times? And so it's a very different connection and conviction story. This is a lot, but I'm going to take this through an example. I started saying earlier that I would ideally want that I walk into every meeting with high connection and high conviction. It's not always possible. There are 4 ways you can look at this. I don't particularly like presentation 2x2s that consultants do, but I think it fits really well here. So if you have a low connection and low conviction, it's not always a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing because you are letting people voice their concern. You are not going in with an opinion. You are creating a room for a very healthy brainstorming discussion. And there are meetings where you don't need a decision out of that meeting. This is the first time you're thinking about a new idea, and you want all ideas to flourish. And this is the first time where you're meeting a group of your engineers, so you don't really have a connection with them, but you want to build it. So you walk into that meeting with a blank slate. And that could be a fine thing to do. I call it leader in hiding just because you're not really there yet. This is a very haphazard, vague meeting, but you're bubbling ideas. You're on your way to building connection. You're on your way to surfacing ideas that could form your conviction, that could shape your conviction in the coming way. I'll go upwards, which is low connection or high conviction. It's my way or the highway. I don't like this block. Because this literally means that I walk into a meeting and I say, I know we're going to do this. We have funding for this project, and this is what we're going to build. I don't think anybody should be here. It's very easy to lose track of where we're going and what decisions we've taken and with what attitude you're walking into a room. I'll come back to that one with an example that I learned by practice. Low conviction, high connection. This is the path of least resistance because you're going in with no opinions in your head. You're going in talking to this person, and you're just there to build that connection because you think you're going to work with this team or with this group of people for the next 3 years. They're your core group that you need to establish that trust with. You need to earn that trust with. And I think that's the path of least resistance is where one should start. unless there are deadlines beating on your head and you need to move faster. The last one, high conviction, high connection. This is the goal that all of us should have in achieving that commonality, having that conviction and connection with your team at the same time and making it easy. Now, it's impossible to do this with people you're meeting for the first time, and so that's okay. So back to the example of Hong Kong that I was talking about. So we decided we are going to re-architect S3. For those who walked in Rata, S3 is cloud storage. I'm going to use the term S3 because I'm used to talking like this. So we decided that we are going to re-architect S3 because we had to comply with these new security requirements. We worked within S3 for around 2 months trying to brainstorm technical solutions. By this time, I'm very familiar with my engineers. We work really well. We have a great connection. We very happily concluded on this is the solution. This is how we'll re-architect our service. Let's go for it. Now, as a PM, and different companies have a TPM, which is a program manager who's supposed to run around and figure out dependencies of your feature and then resolve them. You won't always have support as a product manager. So I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out, hey, we're making this change. We are going to re-architect our service in a certain way. Who does this impact? Now, because we're cloud storage, every other service within AWS stores their data on our platform. Which means that changes we make impact every single 167 other services that I spoke about that AWS has. And now, figuring out what happens to these services and how they're going to deal with it was a challenge I had to come to the drawing board on. So this was when I was new to AWS. And clearly didn't know what the dependencies looked like. So what I did was some of the cartoons I showed you earlier, went and picked brains of engineers, asked them, who do you think is our biggest storage user within AWS? A lot of this was available in the form of data. You could look at storage patterns. You could look at lots of metrics that we track, our billing usage, because internal teams are paying us revenue for the data they're storing on us. So I identified 3 services. And I was like, OK, I need to go talk to them. I need to tell them, we are making this change in the next 3 months, and you need to deal with it. So I went into that meeting with a lot of high conviction. And because we'd worked on this for 3 months, I knew this was the right technical design. This had to be done. So I walked into the meeting with the engineering manager of CloudWatch. CloudWatch is our AWS's monitoring service. So they directly take data from us. They generate metrics. They store stuff on S3. So I walked in, and I was like, this is a document. This is what we're doing. Let's talk about it. And the first reaction that engineering manager had was, hey, you're going to break our service. You're making a change, which means we have to make a code change. If we don't make this code change in the next 3 months, our service is going to break. We went back and forth an hour arguing about how big that code change would be, which he had to make in his service. That was the most useless meeting I have been to, because literally for an hour, I was trying to convince him that his service's code change was not big enough, and they should listen to our re-architecture and redesign their service without knowing what that service looks like. So I learned it the hard way, and that was the wrong type of meeting to go in with high conviction. I was meeting this manager for the first time. I had a lot at stake. He had nothing at stake. I am probably not going to work with this person again. There was no reason he'd listen to me. Just because I was coming from a service where they store data on didn't mean they had to listen to me. So that meeting got escalated and didn't go anywhere. Then I had to get a few people from my team into the meeting with his team next time. And then it was a very low conviction and a low connection meeting, because these engineers were talking to each other for the first time. So we brainstormed a lot of ideas. It was, it was them trying to help us how we could tweak our re-architecture. It was us trying to help them what to do. In the end of that meeting, we decided we will still go with our original re-architecture design, which was what I had gone in with high conviction. But it didn't help. Even if it was the right thing to do, it didn't help because I had no connection with that person. And the way we resolved it was we loaned them 3 of our engineers who knew how to adapt this new architecture in their service. And so we found a solution through it, but not in the traditional way, not in the way that I went into that meeting. And so now whenever I am going to talk to a new person, this is kind of the framework I look at as to what is my objective out of the meeting. Do I want to create a path of least resistance? Or do I want to just go into a meeting, it's a 30-minute conversation, we've discussed this issue before, I know these people really well, I want to make a decision, and I want to make sure that it's heard. And that has kind of helped move really fast in an environment where I need time to figure out what's going on. I need time to move from one work stream to another. I need time to move from one project to the other. If I'm spending 3 hours trying to convince people of an idea, that's a waste of everyone's time. And I was talking to someone earlier, and they said, I think it was Priya, you again, about how do you manage all these different action items that you're trying to look at. So you're looking at writing documents that define the product roadmap. You're looking at writing technical design documents that the engineering is going to take forward. You're looking at marketing documents, like what is your go-to-market strategy about this product? You're looking at technical documentation. How do I write the API specs of this? You're also looking at what the pricing of this feature looks like. Where am I going to build the cost model? I'm sure some of you have come across project management tools. I have found them to be extremely useful just in consolidating thoughts, in like assigning tasks to people, in like keeping track of what you're doing and making sure that nothing is dropping out. I haven't found Excel to be a very good tool, personally. It's two-dimensional. When you have these work streams, you need a lot more dimensions into it. You just don't need a timeline. You need different work streams. You need different project streams. So you could go look up any of the project management tools. There are multiple. I think we use something called Playbook, which might or might not be Amazon's internal tool. I'm not aware. But you could look up, we were talking about Jira, you could look up any of the project management tools, play around with them. They're super useful. Most teams have a standard tool that they use. Adoption rates are low across teams for such tools. I think engineering teams do a very good job of tracking their SIMs and their code changes in these tools, but product teams don't do a good job. So I'd say be the first one and go and start this in your team. Like, talk about it, see what people are doing.